Well, hi, and welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. I'm Renee Williams, and I'm here with my co-host, Billy Thomas, and we both work for the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources, and we greatly appreciate you being with us today.
Yeah, Renee, it's great to have everyone with us, and we really appreciate it. We know there's a lot going on, and you could be doing other things, but you're with us, and that's great. Another humid, hot day in Kentucky, so sit back. We've got a great show. Dr. Jonathan Larson's on with us again, our resident forest entomologist, and he's going to be talking about kind of some good things and maybe something that's a little bit concerning a little bit later on. He's going to be talking about some of the beneficial insects that we have in our woodlands. We have
one thing we don't hear about it, bug friends. We're always going bad bugs. So I'm glad we're actually listening to some good bugs today.
Yeah, the great point. A lot of times it might seem doom and gloomy, but there are a lot of good insects out there that do a lot of great things, and we'll learn about those. Then we have Laurie Thomas doing our ever popular tree of the week. One of our oaks is coming up, so that'll be great. And then we have Dr. Ellen Crocker. She's going to be doing pesky plants, and she's going to be featuring a tree that has a moniker of like heavenly, but you'll find out that it's not really that heavenly. So that's not good. And then we'll wrap it up with a little bit about upcoming programs, as well as maybe some of the bad news that Dr. Jonathan Larson recently found out. So, but a great show. Please interact with us via the chat pod if you're on Zoom, and if you're on Facebook Live, use the comment sections, and we're just glad to have you with us.
Right. All right. So let's get started because we have another jam-packed show. All right. Dr. Larson, are you available?
I'm here.
Hi.
Hey.
How are you doing today?
We're good. We're good. Tell us a little bit about what you're going to talk about.
Well, I was excited because I'm going to get to talk about some of the insects that I like here today, some of the ones that we kind of want to keep around. I know usually when I'm on, we're talking about things that are destroying trees or ruining forests or just making life kind of hectic for everybody. So it's always fun to get to talk a little bit about something that's nice and something that helps us out. So is it okay if I go ahead and get started?
Yeah.
Perfect. So we have over 1 million species that we've identified. There's some people who think there could be up to about 30 million more species left to discover. Other estimates put it around 10. We just have lots and lots of insects that are out there. You can see some of the differences in form and function. These are just beetles that we're looking at here in this little picture. And there's just a ton of different kinds of insects that we can encounter. Now, I think it's very unfortunate when people think about bugs, they often just think of the word pest. They think of bad things, very negative things. Pest has almost become synonymous with the word insect. And I'm not here today to refute that there are bad bugs out there. There are, of course, pest insects that are out there. A pest is any destructive insect or other animal that attacks our crops, like we see with this spotted cucumber beetle here, our food in our home. So things like a pantry moth or things of that nature. Our livestock, we're seeing that with ticks more and more. Our home, when we deal with termites or carpenter ants, or even our personal bodies when we talk about bed bugs and mosquitoes. We also have some that just annoy us, like the carpet beetle or warehouse beetle that you see on the right there. There's just lots of different kinds of pests that can get into our lives. There's lots of different categories that they can fall into. But of all those million species that I mentioned before, only 1% of the insects, I would call them serious pests. That includes things like the Japanese beetle that we see here on the left, something that's a pest as an adult and as a larva. Of course, we would call that a serious pest. Feeds on over 400 different species of plants as an adult. It is the bane of many a gardener's existence. We can't argue against that. They cause millions of dollars in damage every year, but it's only 1% of the population. Another 3% we would call minor pests. My minor pest example here is a green June beetle. I think they're very beautiful, iridescent beetles. You see them on the wing right now in the summer. They're buzzing around. They sound kind of like a bumblebee when they fly. They look like Notre Dame fans with that kind of green and gold coloration. But sometimes they feed on fruit that we would have otherwise harvested. Sometimes they are a problem in turf when their larvae are kind of tunneling through the grass. But usually they're kept in check by some of the beneficial insects that we'll talk about today. And therefore we don't deal with them very often. That's another 3%. So that's 4% of insect life we would call pests. And I think it's very unfortunate that we indict the other 96% of life, which we would consider maybe neutral or beneficial. And that's what I want to talk about today, our bug friends. These are things that just kind of exist on Earth. It is a very anthropocentric thing to talk about beneficial insects. We always want to say, oh, well, what have you done for me lately? That's how humans kind of look at nature and how we interact with the world. So we do want to talk about beneficials and lift them up. But those neutral ones, I think, are just as important to point out. Most insects, they're just kind of there. They're just out in nature, part of the great machine of life. They're just cogs in all of these ecosystems that we see. I would point to something like a stonefly there on the left. How many of you are awake at night thinking about stoneflies? Probably not very many of you. I may be the only one on the call. Maybe if you're a fly fisherman or something of that effect, you think about these aquatic invertebrates or things that are in those aquatic ecosystems. But usually we don't need to send them a second thought. They're just kind of out there. Same for ground beetles. Maybe they sometimes get in your house, but usually they're just kind of out there. They're just out in the woods. They're out in the fields. They're living their life. They're eating their things. They're trying to mate with each other. They just want to pass on their genetic material. We don't profit from these. They're a part of beautiful and complex environmental systems, which I think is important and we should preserve, but we don't necessarily get something out of it. We can point to insects though and say some of these provide us economic goods. Things like honey and silk come from insects. Also red food dye in the past came from insects. Others provide us services, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Some of these beneficials that do good things in the environment for us. So the first ones I want to point out are things that are predators. Predators are things that attack and consume multiple prey items over their life. The biggest prey or the biggest predator that we talk about in the insect world typically is the lady beetle group. So lady beetles are predators of aphids, scales, and mealybugs. They can be found in wooded areas in the summer and in the winter. In the summer, they're out in the treetops looking around for food. In the winter, they use a lot of the logs and fallen debris for their overwintering habitat. On the right there, you can see that's hundreds, maybe even thousands of lady beetles that have been hanging out all winter long. They get in these big groups. They have an aggregation pheromone that brings them all together. On the left, you can see their life cycle. I think it's important to show this because sometimes people see these big oval yellow eggs and they're afraid they're for a pest. They also sometimes bring me the larva, which you can see in the upper right-hand corner of that diagram. It looks kind of like an alligator. It's got kind of a scaly appearance, but they'll be in curled up leaves feeding on pest insects like aphids, but people will bring me those and think that they are the pest culprit because they don't look as cute and cuddly as the adult version does. They will pupate. The pupa often looks like a bird dropping on the plant, and out of that will emerge the adult lady beetle that we know and love. Those beautiful convex sort of insects with their big backs and also their bright coloration. They exhibit what we call warning coloration or aposematism. This is a way of saying, hey, if you mess with me, I'm going to mess with you back. Don't eat me. I taste bad. We know that these taste bad because we're entomologists and we've licked them and tasted the stuff that comes out of them. It's very bitter. If you see some old science, you'll see that it can be acidic. They fed them to things like blue jays, and they found that after a few of them, they would vomit. So they actually will sort of flex their knees, and out of that will come blood, their version of blood, and it has all these compounds in it that make them very foul tasting. So this warning coloration is an advertisement that if you eat me, it will not go well for you. And predators will learn not to consume things that have these bright contrasting colors. There's lots of species of lady beetles here in Kentucky. I would point to the 7-spotted lady beetle up here in the upper left. You'll never guess how it got its name. It has 7 spots. You count them, 3 on each side, 1 in the center. This is the pink lady beetle. You'll never guess how it got its name either. Entomologists are not very creative people, is what I'm trying to say. We see a pink ladybug, it's the pink ladybug. Over here, we got the convergent lady beetle. It has these 2 lines on its back that if they kept going, they would converge and make an X. And then, of course, down here in the lower right-hand corner, we have the multicolored Asian lady beetle. So named because they can come in multiple colors. You can see oranges, brick reds, you can see yellows, pale oranges, but they all have this M on the top of their back, which stands for multicolored Asian lady beetle. This is a beneficial predator when it's outside. It's also has a lot of negative connotations in people's minds because they have, in some theories, they've pushed out some of our native lady beetles. In other cases, they just get into our houses and they bite us, or they get into our wine through the vineyard procedures. They actually get harvested with the grapes and they can ruin wine. So they do have some negative things attached to them. But when they're in the field or they're in the trees, they're consuming all different kinds of aphids and pests that we don't want to have around. And I thought I would show you here real quick just what that looks like. This is a 7-spotted lady beetle. A video I found of it, you can see it is consuming this aphid. It's caught it by the rear end, and now it's using its mandibles and other parts of its mouth part to just mouthpieces to sort of funnel it, slurp it up like spaghetti. It was a whole aphid sitting there on that leaf, and now it ain't no more. Then all the other aphids are just sitting there watching. I always find it very funny. People talk about lady beetles in these sort of hallowed ways and talk about them as these cute and cuddly things. Really, they are voracious predators, and they will mow through about 5,000 of these aphids over the course of their life. They do this as adults and as larvae. So that's what they're doing. They are hunters. They're looking for food. They are not these cute and cuddly little things that we see in cartoons. Other beneficial predators you can find in the woods would include the lacewings. These have very slender bodies. They almost look like a dragonfly kind of in profile, except they can fold their wings up. And they get their name from their vein-filled wings, which look like lace doilies, as you can see in these images. With these, we have two different kinds. We have the green lacewings and the brown ones. Again, entomologists not very creative when we name things. It's a green lacewing, bada bing, bada boom. We're happy with that. You can see the adults. You can also see the eggs and the larvae living in trees. The eggs are unique because they're laid at the ends of these long stalks, and we'll see these on the backs of leaves. The larvae, when they hatch out, they crawl down, and then they can't crawl back up. This is a way of reducing cannibalism as a species, because once they hatch out, they will try to eat each other, even in the egg form. So they're not very conscientious of their siblings. They will try to gobble them down if they're the first ones to hatch. But you can see the larva there on the right. I think it's a really interesting looking thing. It looks like a sort of a saber-toothed alligator almost, or a dinosaur. They eat lots of things like aphids, scales. They will consume caterpillars. Here's one that's taken down a caterpillar quite a bit larger than it. Reminds me of a lion taking down a gazelle. They've got it by the neck. They use those sickle-shaped mouth parts to sort of slurp up some of the juices and help chew that food up. It's a very interesting way of going about finding your food. I think they're very cool. When they land on people, sometimes they will bite us just because they're confused about what we are. But by and large, we consider these very beneficial. There's also predaceous bugs that are out there. They have a needle-like mouth part. You can see it on the right here on the front of this wheel bug. They do vary a lot in size and coloration. Some of these are called ambush bugs. Some of these are called assassin bugs. Most of the time they have the same sort of profile. They look vaguely like a stink bug, but if you look at the edges of their body, they have these flanges that kind of stick up. I call them love handle projections. Maybe some of us identify with this after the quarantine. If you've been eating your stress, you know that there can be these sort of projections off the side. We see that with these true bugs as well. They have these flanges on the side that help to separate them out from the stink bugs and others. The main one that we see with this group is the wheel bug. The wheel bug is a very large true bug. It's one of the biggest assassin bugs that we see. They're famous for their cog-shaped pronotum. You can see that on the left here. It looks almost like a Spartan helmet or a cog from a watch. They have this huge beak in the front. If you handle these, they will poke you with it sometimes. They are related to stink bugs, so they're also semi-stinky. These eat Japanese beetles. They love eating fall webworms. If you hate seeing those in trees when you're wandering around in the woods, these help to control some of those populations. They're very active predators. Here's one that has sized up a caterpillar. It's decided it wants to eat it. You can see it remove its beak from its protective sheath under its head and sort of stick it out. And now it's going to jab that into the caterpillar, and they are going to start slurping all of those juices right out of that insect. That's how they get their nutrition. It's an all liquid diet. But I think it kind of reminds me of a vampire, right? They go for the neck and they just start sucking all that stuff out. Very neat little predator. A distant cousin of them in a different group is called the minute pirate bug. It's much smaller. You can see on the right, that's it in comparison to the edge of a penny. These are very abundant in woodlands and in meadows. They're a generalist predator. They eat lots of aphids and scales and things like that. They have a beak as well. They shove that into those aphids and suck them dry. You can see some of the discarded bodies there on the right. This short beak also gets them in trouble into the fall because they will land on people as well. And they think, what is this weird squishy surface I've landed on? And they'll probe us. It feels like a pinprick sensation. And sometimes these come out in such big numbers that they drive people outside very crazy in the fall, just creating all these itchy little red welts. There are lots of other beneficials, of course, that we could talk about. I thought about going into pollinators, but everybody knows pollinators, right? We love them. Bees, beetles, ants, moths, butterflies. We love those things, but we've also talked about them a lot in the last 10 years. And I wanted to give some love to a very underappreciated group that's very common in wooded areas, in this teeming universe below our feet, and the litter that we see all around us, and that leaf litter and all that humus that's developing on the ground. In the rotting logs, we find the decomposers, nature's recyclers, things that turn old vegetation, fecal material, wood products, all of that into nutrients that return into the soil to help keep a healthy environment and make sure that we don't live in a giant trash heap, basically. One group I would point to is the millipedes. If you flip over any log in the woods, you're going to see millipedes running around. They are tube shaped. They have two pairs of legs per segment, generally are brown or black or gray in coloration. They will curl up into a ball when they feel threatened, but these eat fecal material. They are also considered very beneficial for breaking down leaf litter. They eat about 11% of the leaves that fall in any given area. But you can see they like slimy, gross stuff, and they may be kind of stinky when you touch them, but without them, we would be surrounded by lots of junk that we don't really want around. Further away from the insects, it would include the springtails. These are other things that live in those moist, kind of gross conditions under logs and rocks in the woods. Springtails have 6 legs. We don't consider them fully true insects. They're kind of a distant cousin, but they also eat fecal material and decaying leaves. They look like fleas when they are walking around because they move very quickly, and they can also jump. They don't use their legs to jump, though. They have this thing called a furcula on their posterior, which is a scientific way of saying they have a pogo stick on their butt, and they can kind of poke that out and hit the ground with it, and it will fling them for a great distance, many times their body length, to get away from things that want to eat them. But you will see these very commonly under logs. Some people call them snow fleas because we can even see them hanging out in the winter under different surfaces, but another beneficial decomposer. I also wanted to point out things that are not just eating leaf litter, but that are eating the animals that perish in the woods and all of those other things that kind of fall down dead out there. And that would include flies, but the carrion beetles are a group that I think are very under-recognized. These are beetles that will actually take dead things. In some cases, they just carve off pieces of them. In other cases, like the burying beetle you see on the left there, the female and male actually mate for life. They work together to drag things like dead voles and dead mice underground. They put enzymes on this dead thing to sort of preserve it so it doesn't completely rot. And then they lay their eggs in it, and they will hatch out, and they actually take care of their babies for a little while, and they help to decompose all of these different organisms that are out in the woods. On the left or on the right, we see a carrion beetle. This is one that gets into the body a little later after decomposition has begun, but they come after the flies and the maggots, and they help to finish that process out. It's a very interesting group. Without them, we would see a lot more dead animals, deer, possums, all those different things out in the woods. And we should thank them for their stinky work that they do so that we don't have to deal with all those decomposing bodies. Last couple of things I'll mention real quick would include the things that help us to break down wood material. And these will be controversial points that I'll bring up because it's not often that you see somebody in a beneficial insect talk about termites. But in a woodland area, I would argue that these are essential pieces of that ecosystem. Without them, we would have stacks and stacks of wood that just wasn't going anywhere. Fungi might get into it and help do some of the work, but termites help to speed that process up. There are colonies all around us at all times feeding on decaying cellulose material that they discover, building their colonies in it, helping to strip it down and return those nutrients to the earth and use them for their colony maintenance. Of course, when this is outside, it's of great help, but once it gets into your home, not so much. But we have protective termite measures that we can take to make sure that they stay outside where they belong and not in the structures that we want to protect. The last one I will mention are wood-boring beetles. We talk about emerald ash borer. We talk about Asian longhorn beetle, all of these different insects that can be considered pests because they get into our upright and standing trees that we want to preserve for beauty or that we want to utilize for logging or for lumber or for firewood. And when we talk about those, they are bad. But their cousins and some of those native ones that we have around, things like the red-headed ash borer and a few others, they're also beneficial recyclers. When a tree falls over, when a branch hits the ground, when all of these logs start stacking up, they help to break that stuff down and return all those nutrients to the earth. It's a beneficial system. It annoys us when they get into our living plants. It annoys us when they get into lumber or into firewood, of course, and then they emerge as adults in your house around December 31st, and they drive you crazy on New Year's Eve. But this is something that has to happen outside. Without it, we would just have piles of wood kind of surrounding us. So I know it's a little controversial to talk about things that eat the wood and take it away from us as beneficial, but in the grand scheme of nature, I would argue it is necessary. So that's kind of my pitch. I hope that some of these will convince you that you don't have to kill all bugs, that we can appreciate some of them. I think that they're beautiful and interesting all on their own. But if you want some things to point to say, this is why we need them, these are the things that I would point to.
Well, you know what? I have never heard a presentation like that, and I greatly appreciate you letting us know about beneficial bugs, because I have a newfound joy for bugs now.
There you go. See, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, we have to appreciate what they do. It is a necessary part of the ecosystem. It's true they annoy us sometimes, they bug us sometimes, but you have to take the good with the bad. They take us with the good and the bad, so maybe we should reciprocate.
And it's a whole hidden world out there of unsung heroes that are doing so much to help us, and we don't give them enough credit. Jonathan, you did a great job with that.
Especially you have bugs that mate for life. I'm like, really?
Oh yeah, we have some bugs that love each other for life. It's a very interesting world. There's a bug for everything out there.
You know, Jonathan, I always knew we had really high decomposition rates in our forests here in Kentucky, and I thought it had probably more to do with like humidity and, temperature and stuff like that, but you really kind of shed some light on what all is helping with that breakdown. So. Yeah,
and that humidity and heat, that will help those organisms that I talked about. Those millipedes, they have been plaguing people this year. They've been trying to get into people's houses as things dry out. But yeah, in a high moisture situation, they're thriving. That's why we see a lot of them this year, but they do annoy us sometimes as well. There's, like I said, there's good with the bad.
Yeah, such is life, right?
Such is life. They love you.
Yes.
For being on, and we'll hear from you in a little bit about another bug.
I know, and Jonathan, I'm not so excited about your next segment, but I do appreciate it, and we'll revisit it here in a few minutes.
We'll talk about the bad one here in a bit.
All right, thank you so much, really. Very interesting. Yes.
It was. Yes. Yeah. It's good to know that there are beneficial bugs out there, and not all bugs bug you.
Exactly. They actually help you. So I'm great. All right. So maybe switching gears a little bit here, we're going to bring up Laurie Thomas and our ever popular tree of the week, I think.
Yep. Laurie, there you are.
Hey, Laurie.
How's everyone today?
About the tree for this week.
Okay, so we're covering yet another one of our oak trees, which Kentucky is rich with oak trees. And today we're going to talk about the scarlet oak. And so here you go, scarlet oak.
Great.
I'm Laurie Thomas with the University of Kentucky Forestry and Natural Resources Extension, and I'm here with the tree of the week, the scarlet oak. Scarlet oak, Quercus coccinea, is one of Kentucky's many oaks and is part of the red oak group. It is also called black oak, red oak, or Spanish oak. It is a medium-sized tree that typically grows to 80 feet tall and about 2 to 3 feet in diameter. It generally has poor form with an irregular crown, and typically many dead branches throughout the crown are common. The lower trunk often exhibits butt swell due to the chestnut blight and can be a good identifying characteristic in the woods. It is shade intolerant and has a rapid growth rate. Trees can live to 400 years, and scarlet oak is named for its brilliant fall color, and the acorns are eaten by a variety of wildlife. Scarlet oak is found growing from southwestern Maine into Alabama and Georgia, west into Missouri and Mississippi, and east to the edge of the coastal plain. It is found on a variety of soils, but is most commonly found growing on sandy and gravelly upland slopes and ridges of a southern exposure. Its best growth is in the Ohio River Valley. Scarlet oak is susceptible to a number of insects and diseases, including gypsy moth, fall cankerworm, two-line chestnut borer, red oak borer, and oak wilt. Additionally, due to its relatively thin bark, it is susceptible to fire damage. Scarlet oak is deciduous with alternately arranged, simple leaves, as you can see in the photo. The leaves are between 3 to 7 inches long, oval in shape, and lobed with very deep sinuses. That's the indentation in the leaves. The leaves usually have between 5 and 9 lobes, and each lobe has a bristle tip, which is a good distinguishing characteristic of the red oak group. The upper surface is shiny green, and the underside is paler, with occasional tufts in the vein axils. Fall color is a showy scarlet red, and the leaves tend to remain on the tree until late autumn. This oak, like other oaks, is monoecious, which means a tree has both male and female flowers. The male flowers are on slender yellow-green catkins, and the female flowers are on short axillary spikes. Both the male and female flowers appear with the leaves in the spring, and the flowers are wind-pollinated. The fruit is a small acorn. The acorns are about 1/2 inch to 1 inch long, and it has a cap that covers about half of the nut. The cap scales tend to be shiny. The tip of the acorn will usually have concentric rings, as you can see in the photo. The acorns mature in 2 growing seasons, with acorns ripening in the fall. More than 80% of scarlet oak acorns may be destroyed by insects. Trees begin seed production around 20 years of age, with maximum seed production after 50 years. Seed production is irregular and unpredictable, but in general, trees produce good seed crops about every 3 to 5 years. The bark on young trees is grayish-brown and has somewhat smooth streaks. As the tree ages, the bark becomes darker, sometimes almost nearly black. The bark develops irregular ridges that are separated by narrow fissures that are vary in width. Scarlet oak wood is ring porous and has a fairly coarse grain. The wood is light to medium reddish-brown in color, but there can be a fair amount of variation. Red oaks, such as scarlet oak, are not as decay-resistant as white oaks, and durability is considered minimal. Scarlet oak wood is commonly mixed with other red oak wood when sold as lumber. We know that from the tiny acorn a mighty oak tree grows, and according to the National Wildlife Federation, oaks are one of the top 10 trees for wildlife because they help wildlife grow. Oaks serve as a host tree for more than 500 lepidopteran larvae, including the imperial moth larvae, many different hair streaks, and dusky wings. These larvae in turn feed the seasonal migratory birds, such as our warblers. The acorns are eaten by woodpeckers, blue jays, small mammals, wild turkey, white-tailed deer, and black bear. And the trees provide good cover because their leaves typically persist longer than other plant associates. Scarlet oak wood is lumped with other red oak wood and shares many of the same traits as northern red oak. It's used for cabinetry, furniture, interior trim, flooring, and veneer. Because it's hardy and has attractive fall foliage, it is a popular shade tree and has been widely planted in the United States and Europe. The national champion scarlet oak as of 2021 is in Mercer, New Jersey. It's 201 inches in circumference, 128 feet tall, with a 122-foot crown spread. The Kentucky champion scarlet oak is in Bell County at the First Presbyterian Church. It is 189 inches in circumference, 104 feet tall, with an 111-foot crown spread. If you'd like to know more about national champion trees or Kentucky champion trees, check out American Forest National Champion Trees or check out the Kentucky Division of Forestry Champion Trees. Now for a few fun facts about scarlet oak. Scarlet oak is the official tree symbol of the District of Columbia. Native Americans and pioneers used the acorns for food, and the roasted acorns have been ground and used as a coffee substitute. The first scientific observation of this tree were made in 1691. The genus name Quercus is the Latin name for oak, and the species name Coccinea is from the Greek kakos, a seed or berry, in reference to the red autumn coloration of this tree. I hope you get the opportunity to get out into your woodland, a local park, or neighborhood this year and enjoy our beautiful oak trees, including the scarlet oak.
Well, Lori, once again, you've done a wonderful job with our Tree of the Week, and we greatly appreciate you doing that.
Sure. And again, like I always say, I enjoy it. It's like I'm taking dendrology all over again. So.
Me too. You know, listening to that one, Laurie, I was thinking how desperate we must have been for coffee a long time ago. It seems like they used everything. they were searching for coffee anywhere, right?
Absolutely. Because I can't imagine that tastes anything like coffee. I mean, we can grind up our acorns to make a meal, you know, like you've had cornbread with it or some type of bread in it. But yeah, I can't imagine it as a coffee. So.
Yeah, really enjoy it.
Types of red oaks are there in Kentucky?
Well, we have 13 different types of red oaks. So we have more red oaks than we do white. We only have 7 different types of white oaks, but still that's a lot of different oak trees in our state, and which is why we're dominated by an oak hickory forest. So that's most of the types of trees we have out in the species we have out in the forest. So yeah.
Would you want to plant a scarlet oak in your backyard? Or
You
if you
could.
were
It doesn't do real well in alkaline soils. So you want to make sure it's more of an, because it's naturally in an acidic soil, not maybe it does really well in good soils, but it also does well in poor sites, which is usually why we find it in the forests and those upper slopes, that south facing aspect. But yes, it is a somewhat commonly used landscape tree, and it's planted in Europe too. I mean, it was attractive enough for its fall foliage to be taken to Europe and planted over there as well.
All right. I guess the only other thing we could add to that is, if you got a smaller space, you probably wouldn't want to plant that. So right tree, right spot, right?
Right, exactly. It is definitely a medium to possibly a large size tree. You saw it can grow up to 80 feet tall, good size diameter. So yeah, you'd want to make sure you don't put it under a power line or right next to the house. So, and I see somebody had a question about how long would an oak tomato stake last in the soil? That I don't know. Red oak, I will say, if it is a red oak, it's not as durable as our white oaks are. So it would decompose more quickly than a white oak would. So but I don't really know the answer to that.
And it would probably vary with the soils and moisture levels and
Mhm.
temperature and all of those things.
Yep, absolutely.
makes sense.
Awesome.
Thank you, Lori. We appreciate it.
Okay, sure. Take care.
Thank you so much.
So
Always love
moving on, we have Dr. Ellen Crocker coming up next to tell us about some pesky plants.
Yeah, and it has a lovely heavenly name, right?
It does. Tree of Heaven. Doesn't sound nice.
Tree of Heaven.
Sounds nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess if what you were looking for was a plant that would grow anywhere, it's got that. It will grow out of the concrete. It's very tolerant of poor conditions. So, in that way, I guess it does seem blessed, but it can cause some major problems, especially in our woodlands. And it's a common sight, I think, increasing in our areas. You'll see it on roadsides this time of year because it is setting seed, and those seeds have this really bright color right now. So it's a good time to scout for it to see if you have it.
All right.
It may be called Tree of Heaven, but don't be fooled by the name. This invasive plant is far from heavenly. Tree of Heaven grows fast, and its windblown seeds can rapidly colonize lots of different habitats. While it's especially common in urban areas, it can also be a big problem in woodlands. Today we're going to learn a little bit about the invasive plant Tree of Heaven, what it is, how to identify it, and what you can do to manage it. Tree of Heaven can grow into a very large tree, up to 80 feet tall, but more frequently you'll see kind of dense thickets of smaller trees and seedlings. This is because it grows clonally, so those roots are sending out suckers that will then grow into trees themselves, all connected through that root system. It has smooth green bark when it's young that matures into a grayish color when it gets older. Tree of Heaven has very long, 1 to 4 feet long, pinnately compound leaves. These will have many, many leaflets on each leaf, 10 to 24. Each of those leaflets is spear-shaped, and you might think it's a leaf by itself, but it's actually part of that larger compound leaf. Those leaves have smooth margins, but they do have a little lobe at the base with a dot or gland on the underside that is pretty distinctive for Tree of Heaven. Leaves are going to be a kind of a reddish color when they first emerge, and then as they grow they will turn a more dark green on top and a light green on the underside. Crushed leaves and shoots and stems smell really bad. They smell like kind of burnt, acidy peanut butter, in my opinion. Shoots are covered with tiny white dots when they first emerge, these lenticels, and those leaf scars have a triangular shape. Tree of Heaven produces clusters of yellow-green flowers in the summer that then mature to pink, maybe even slightly reddish or yellow-green seed pods later in the summer. These are going to be kind of twisty, but as they age, they're going to become more papery and brown, and those will be retained on the trees through the winter. Tree of Heaven is widespread in the US, and it thrives in a range of different habitats. It can grow in really poor soils where other things might not as well. places like degraded urban sites and reclaimed mining sites. In Kentucky's woodlands, the biggest threat posed by tree of heaven occurs just after a harvest, when if those seeds blow in, if you have tree of heaven in the area and it establishes, it can prevent the native species that you want to see growing and thriving and becoming that next generation of your forest from establishing. And instead you just get a sea of tree of heaven. While tree of heaven prefers full sun areas, it can also invade those more closed woodlands, waiting for the right disturbance to come up so it can take off. Tree of heaven is a rapidly growing early colonizer that can outcompete the native species you want to be seen. This is especially true on those poor quality sites. In addition, tree of heaven's roots are thought to exude chemicals that actually inhibit the growth of other plants. Because tree of heaven can grow so thickly, and it can also become a dominant tree species growing into the overstory, it's a major concern on woodlands, especially those that have been commercially harvested. Sustainable management of tree of heaven requires scouting for seedlings on your property and your neighbors, because if you do have a disturbance and you have a seed source in the area, those seeds can arrive and take over. In most woodlands, tree of heaven occurs as a few sprouts, maybe a small thicket to start with. So when you see that, that's a really good time to manage it before it gets bigger, before it spreads. Those very small seedlings could be pulled out by hand, but because tree of heavens has such an extensive root system, you really need to make sure to kill the entire root system, either pulling it up or using a systemic herbicide. Otherwise, it's gonna just sprout right back up. When controlling tree of heaven with herbicides, there are typically 3 techniques that are used. First, a foliar spray for those smaller trees, those seedlings, where you can easily reach all of the foliage. Second, maybe a cut stump on those smaller trees where you can cut them down and apply herbicide to that cut stump directly so that then it's absorbed by that root system. It kills that tree as well as any other trees that are connected to it, any of those other shoots that are coming up. And then for those larger trees, a hack and squirt, where you hack into the tree and then you squirt herbicide into that wound so that the tree absorbs it that way.
Basal bark herbicide application is another great option for those smaller trees that still have thin bark.
After that initial management, follow-up is going to be needed to first make sure that all of those trees were killed and they're not sprouting back up by the root system, but also to make sure that new seeds aren't sprouting up from the seed bank. Make a habit of checking your woods, especially after disturbance, to determine if you have tree of heaven or any other invasives, and if any follow-up treatment is needed from your past management. Thank you for joining me today and learning more about the invasive plant tree of heaven. If you'd like to learn more, make sure to check us out on social media and follow us online. Thank you for fighting invasive plants and doing your part to make our woodlands healthy.
Well, thank you, Ellen. We greatly appreciate you doing that for us. And, you know, I have heard in the past that it is more difficult to get rid of tree of heaven, and that when you cut it, it makes it mad. Is that true?
That is totally accurate. So if you just cut it and don't apply herbicide, it is going to just sprout right back up from that root system, as bad, if not worse, you know, what it was initially. So if you don't like using herbicides, this is something that you're really gonna have to stay on top of. You know, do that repeatedly, really regularly. Try to get them when they're small and put out that whole root system. But those systemic herbicides that we use, the reason why they're so helpful with tree of heaven is that they'll kill that root system. And a lot of times you'll see trees, let's say along a roadside or something, and they're kind of growing all together and they're all connected by that root system, you know, all these different tree of heaven shoots. So that'll be helpful in that management as well. And I can say, from having looked around at a lot of these this past week, they are, you know, they have these bright colors right now, so you can pick them out on the side of the road, those reds and yellows and pinks, and they are smelly. So even just standing next to them, getting my video, they are smelly. I have heard that some people, the sap can be irritating to them. So if you're managing, if you're pulling it out, you want to be wearing some protective equipment, you know, some gloves, some eye protection, just in case you're one of those people that responds to it.
So if you kill one, it's not going to kill the whole root system underneath.
No, if you just get that one, if you just pull out that one, it's probably not going to get, unless it's small enough that you can pull out that whole root system, which some of those small ones are.
Yeah. And, you know, Ellen, I've seen a few times where people just cut like a main stem and then no herbicide applied, and then it's just a worse problem than they have.
Yeah, you might as well not do anything if you're going to do that. Although I will say that one of the reasons why people might manage those bigger trees would be just to stop them from setting seed. Maybe you've got a big seed producer and you want to get rid of that, and it's just really important to do it right now.
Yeah.
You know, I encourage you to do what you can to actually kill that plant, but at the very least, stopping it from seeding is a good approach too.
Yeah.
And another interesting fact about Tree of Heaven is that it is the preferred host for an invasive bug, a bug we don't want to see, not a friendly bug, but one that you know, has been popping up in different parts of the country and causing some big problems. And we thought we were relatively, you know, safe here in Kentucky. We were pretty far away from the closest outbreak. And lo and behold, they found it very close to Kentucky just last week. And so Jonathan Larson, I'm going to invite him back to talk a little bit about this invasive insect that loves Tree of Heaven, but unfortunately does not stay on Tree of Heaven.
Yeah,
but knowing how to ID Tree of Heaven is great, because if you have Tree of Heaven, that's a good place to scout for it.
This bug isn't going to kill Tree of Heaven. Is that what you're telling me?
I wish it killed Tree of Heaven and just stayed on Tree of Heaven and nothing else. But then, of course, it likes just about every plant under the sun. And while it really likes Tree of Heaven, it does not stay there, and it'll move on to everything else, right, Jonathan?
It would be a good biocontrol agent if it did. Unfortunately, we cannot rely on it for that kind of setup. Yeah. So the spotted lanternfly is an insect that is invasive, first found in Pennsylvania not too long ago, actually. It's been spreading in that state ever since about 2014. And it's an amazing looking insect, I would say. You were talking about the bright, cute colors and hues that you see on the Tree of Heaven. Similarly, the spotted lanternfly exhibits this sort of bright red coloration on its back wings. They also have sort of this reticulated pattern on their front wings and spots. It's a very interesting looking bug. But yes, we thought we were pretty far away from it. Unfortunately, it has hopped a great distance, and it was found recently in Switzerland County, Indiana, about 2.5 miles from the Ohio River, which puts it about 3 miles away from Gallatin County, Kentucky, which is concerning to say the least. Did you see any while you were out, Ellen? Keeping your eyes open though for us?
No, but I'm keeping my eyes peeled for it, of course, in all of its life stages, right? Do you have some photos for us to show us what that looks like?
I do. I have some videos if you're okay
Great.
with me sharing. Yeah. So we'll start from the top here. This is the adult, as you can see, very brightly colored in the back, beautiful pattern in the front. It's a true bug, has a sucking mouth part, but a lot of people will call this a lantern moth or the red lantern moth. Some people call it the red lantern bug. There's lots of common names that seem to be getting thrown around for it, but that bright coloration sort of confuses people and makes them think that it must be a butterfly or something. It is a true bug though. It's not part of the Lepidoptera group. It's part of the Hemiptera group. And that beautiful coloration is warning. Since we talked about the Tree of Heaven and its chemical defenses, they do absorb that chemical from the Tree of Heaven as they feed on it, and it helps to protect them as well. Here it is in action, crawling up the plant. So you can see they have sort of a cicada-like profile when seen from the side. They are quick. They crawl quickly. If you try to approach it, they will do a backwards hop. And I tried to get some slow motion video of that like we see from the Olympics on the long jumpers and things, but none of them were cooperating with me. But you can see just how quick they are and see how they kind of look in profile and when they're crawling on their host. And then we have the nymphs. So this is an early nymph. You can see they're black and white spotted. These ones were found in the woods. I don't want to divulge too much about the situation in which we discovered these. Suffice to say, they were found on private land. A man found them one morning on a tree that he had planted, a Tree of Heaven that he had planted. He noticed a nymph on it, and the Indiana DNR came out and found an infestation in the woods. The USDA, I think, has now certified it as an infested spot just because there are multiple life stages present. So these were early nymphs that we discovered, and then we found a later nymph while we were out there. The later nymphs have more red on their body instead of just the black. You can see them in comparison to the fly that was there earlier. So start over. There's the fly down there. So they're not huge at this point, but they are noticeable. I want to point out that fly because it helps you to understand one of the problems with this pest, which is that when they are feeding, they are constantly sucking sugary sap out of the tree, and they're also constantly defecating sugary material everywhere. So what we're seeing here is the forest floor and the plants underneath some of these trees of heaven and black walnuts that they were hanging out on. You can see they're all coated in black sooty mold. It recruits this sugar water that they excrete is called honeydew. It recruits the black sooty mold, also attracts flies and bees. It was kind of scary actually in the spot that I was filming because the air actually hummed with the noise of wasps, bees, and flies above me. It was very noisy and distracting. So they do recruit a lot of those as they feed. This is a problem, not just because they are invasive. It would be nice if they fed just on Tree of Heaven, but they have 70 different hosts, which include grapes. They also love some hops. So wine and beer are both under threat if you enjoy those beverages. They also get on maples. So if you like maple syrup, this is a problem for that. And they actually are a home invader in the fall, similar to brown marmorated stink bug. So we have these pictures from Pennsylvania of people's chimney. There's just thousands of these sort of swarming down into their fireplace and crawling around their home. There's a famous image, I think, of a guy, he's scooping them up with a snow shovel to get them off his porch. It's gross and weird, and it is not something that people enjoy experiencing. So we're hoping it stays in Indiana. It is probably just a matter of time, but if you see anything weird out there, let us know.
So that's a really good point. So we know about this from some homeowner who reported it.
Yes.
So if people see something, if they've got concerns about some insect that they've found, who should they contact?
We would appreciate if you contacted the Office of the State Entomologist. They're the ones that do a lot of these inspections. So if you see something weird on a Tree of Heaven, if you see a brightly colored insect and you want confirmation that it is or is not the spotted lanternfly, you can forward it to them. They'll distribute it to our department, usually to me, so that I can help with the identification. You can also just send it straight to me, jonathan.larson@uky.edu. I'm happy to take a look. I'd rather look at 1,000 things that aren't spotted lanternfly and catch the one that is than miss out on that opportunity. So if you see the nymphs, if you see the adults, the egg cases are also interesting. It looks like mud that's been spackled on to logs and onto things like lawn furniture and materials that are getting moved around. They also get on cars and trucks, and they will glue their eggs in the wheel wells. That's one of the ways that they get transmitted around. So we have to be very conscientious and very observant if we want to keep this one at bay.
How do you get rid of them?
It's a good question. So Ellen was talking about going through and removing all of those trees. That's actually something that the people in Pennsylvania have been doing. They cut down a lot of the trees of heaven, tree of heavens. I don't know what's the plural, but they will cut down a lot of the smaller ones and leave the big ones behind, and they create a trap tree. So all the spotted lanternfly will go to it. They systemically treat it with dinotefuran, and then as they feed on it, they're killed. You'll also, if you go to Pennsylvania, you'll see that in some counties, they have bands on the trees. So there's this big glue band that wraps around it to catch them and monitor for them. You'll also see sometimes that they have permits for people that live in those communities to get out of the community. They have to verify that they're not transmitting it out of the quarantine zone. It's an intense situation at this point.
Early detection. So help us if you want to see it, please. Yeah, let us know.
Definitely. Wow.
Great. Thanks for being on and telling us about that. And hopefully we'll get some more updates in the near future. But I know that's a recent discovery. Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah.
I like the beneficial bugs.
Yeah, it sucks my argument out of all of them.
Just like a bug. Just like a bug to suck that argument out, right?
Yes, indeed. Jonathan, we do appreciate your efforts and your contributions to this show. And like I said, we've got you as an honorary member of our Forestry and Natural Resources Extension team, and we appreciate all you do for us and
I appreciate it.
across the state.
I look forward to having my wooden badge in the future.
There you go. Thank you so much.
Excellent. And Dr. Crocker, thank you as always for your work. Yeah, it's really good.
So in the few minutes we have left, we have some upcoming programs because this is the end of the month. And so we're going to talk about August and what we're going to be doing.
All right, so I'll go ahead and share the screen here for us. Really, the big ones we got coming up is it actually started last night, and that is our Woodland Owners Short Course. This is our annual program where we try to get with woodland owners across the state. We bring in a lot of partners and a lot of different organizations, and we're trying to help woodland owners take care of their woods. And we started last night with the Woodland Owners Short Course with the 5 W's of woodland management. So if you have already missed that, that's okay. We do have that recorded, so it's not too late to sign up and participate in this series. We do have on tomorrow night, Dr. Ellen Crocker is going to be talking about woodland health issues and what some of the things you can do. She's going to be featuring her Healthy Woods app. And then next Tuesday, we have Dr. Muller is going to be talking about woodland management practices. And then next Thursday, we're going to have Dr. Matt Springer talking about wildlife management practices. And then those are all intended to try to get you all ready for the field sessions. We do have one in Princeton on August 14th. We have one in August 21st at Robinson Forest. And the one on August 28th at Bernheim is already full. So we really appreciate the great response on that, but we did have limited capacity. So the one at Bernheim is already full, but we do have openings for the field sessions on August 14th and August 21st. So if you know of anybody be interested in this, please encourage them to sign up. It's a great way to get a lot of information in a short period and make some great connections that can help you and your woodlands in the future. Next, I want to mention our upcoming shows for August for From the Woods Today. We're going to start off on August 4th with a segment on hummingbirds. That's going to be really interesting, really amazing little creatures, and we're going to be talking about them. And then we're going to have on August 11th an update on the Kentucky Ag Water Quality Plan. We're going to have Dr. Amanda Gumbert in talking about that, some of the new developments going on with that. And then we're going to have our very own Darren Morris talking about the White Oak Initiative. This is a big ongoing effort. Not only in Kentucky, but basically in a multi-region around central United States. I'm trying to protect and promote white oak in our forests, and we're having some real issues with that. So Darren will give us a good overview about what they're doing with the White Oak Initiative and ways that you all can get involved if you're interested. And then on the last of the month, on August 25th, we're going to have Dr. Matt Springer talking about our vultures and the good and bad of that and what can be done about some of that. So a good series of programs coming up in August, and we encourage you all to participate in all of them. And as always, please help us spread the word about these. We think there's a lot of people who benefit from them if they just knew about them. So please help us get the word out about them.
Exactly. We are always excited for people to join us in our Wednesday talks. Well, you know what? We're pretty much done for today.
Yeah, a great show. Thank you all to all our guests. Jonathan and Laurie and Ellen, really appreciate it. And Renee, as always, thanks for all you do to keep the wheels on this bus. So
we've heard some good things. We've heard some not so good things, but we take the good with the bad here at the show.
Yeah, so we have to. Yep.
Keep joining us, and you can always go to fromthewoodstoday.com to see any of our shows. All of our past shows are there, and we also have forms there that you can go ahead and make a comment if you want, or do a show suggestion, because we take those.
Yeah, please let us know. We want to be responsive to your all's needs and what you're seeing in your neck of the woods. So gotta let us know.
Yes. Until then, though, take care, and we will see you next Wednesday at 11.
Bye, everyone.